Hello and very warm welcome to Dr. Ahmed YouTube channel. This time also I'm going to record a very small poem that is from Robert Frost, an American poet. And the poem title is going to be Stopping by the Woods on a snowy evening, stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. That's a very wonderful poem by a very wonderful poet, Robert Frost, like he's going to be. Robert Frost is an American poet, but his fame came to its reality when he turned towards London, stayed in England for some time, and there he was published. Prior to that, while living in America, even after spending a lot of time there and writing a number of pieces of poetry, he couldn't become famous. But it was London which gave him fame, and that fame traveled towards USA as well, and later on he was established as an American modern poet. Definitely his poetry had a big impact on the American people and as well as the poetry. We need to, however, take one stance before we start with the poem, that he is a poet of nature, but not in the sense of Wordsworth, that he thought about nature to be the benevolent mother. Instead of that, Robert Frost thinks nature as a companion with which he can live, with which he can sustain his life, with which he can deal with in a very modern way. And he feels how a modern man can fix himself in the context of nature. So in that way, nature is beautiful, is attractive, is having a positive impact on the mind of man, resembling up to some extent with Wordsworth, but he's not worshipping nature in the same way as Wordsworth started to worship and take her as the mother nature. Robert Frost was born in 1874 in California, and he lived a long time in this world and ultimately died in 1963 in Boston, Massachusetts. And in that way, he is the person who dies in the 20th century, in the later half of the 20th century. So he's the one who has witnessed not only the American history in the 19th century and later on 20th century also, and definitely because of his lifespan like that, he might have witnessed the war as well, and actually it was the war which made him travel back to America, or otherwise he possibly might have lived in UK. He went to USA because of the World War. And so that is the lifespan in which Robert Frost lived, and he is now recognized as the representative American poet, winning number of awards and shields and prizes. So much he's going to be. So his famous poems, as we know, are Apple Picking and the Mending Walls, and so many other poems like My Desert Places, very philosophical ones as well. The current poem, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, is also of multiple interpretations. But before that, let us do some justice with the poem by understanding the stanzas and the summary of the poem as well. The very first stanza, the poet says, "Whose words these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though he will not see me stopping here to watch his words fill up with snow." 4 lines of the first stanza. And first of all, the question is put, whose words it can be. This question goes to show that possibly the poet does not know. But the very next line says that he knows the man to whom these words belong, to whom this place belongs. And so he says that he may be in the village, and takes excuse from that when the owner is in the village. Possibly he can stop there, he can look at the snowy wood, he can look at the snow, he can look at many places there, and he will not be questioned why he's stopping there. So the very first stanza creates a type of ambiguity, whether the poet knows or he does not know the owner, whether the poet knows the place or he does not know. But the very next line clarifies that he does know that. So this interplay between knowing and not knowing creates interest of the poem. And also some type of reflection is created in the poem. So the first stanza is about the fact that a passenger, the traveler, the rider, the horse rider has stopped there, and he is looking at the snow and is imagining whose place it can be. And later on he attaches the knowledge that this poem can be of some farmer who lives in the village, and so he's gone to the village and this place is empty. So emptiness of the place attaches the theme of the poem with the isolation theme, which most of the time we find in Robert Frost poetry. And the depth of the ice and the snow with which he mentions these things, that is also evident here in the very first stanza. The second stanza says, "My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and the frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year." Now the shift moves from human beings to animals. So 100% isolation is not there, as 100% not knowing and knowing was there in the first stanza. 100% isolation is not there because at least one companion is available, and that is the horse. The horse on which the writer, the poet was riding, or the narrator is riding, that horse is up to some extent feeling awkward to stand there at the place which was unfamiliar to him possibly. And that is why, or not unfamiliar in the sense that it is unfamiliar that before that, prior to this, the horse didn't stop there, the master didn't make him stop there. So that is why the horse is feeling a little bit awkward and confused. And this is the feeling of the poet. And why does the poet has this feeling? He takes the clue from the jerking of the neck which comes by the horse, which comes in the next stanza, not here. So we are told to wait why the anxiousness of the horse is being talked about here. Not only from man to horse, but also from horse to nature. As the poet says that his stopping place is between two things. One is the snowy wood, other is the frozen lake. There he's stopping, and the horse is up to some extent feeling awkward there. In the third stanza, he gives the answer why he's talking of the confusion of the horse. He says, he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and snowy flake. So very interestingly, the poet started from the human presence and later on converted himself to the animal presence, and here is the nature that comes as a whole part of man's life. As a man becomes the center of this nature, the poet says that the horse was giving jerk to his neck, and as a result the bells which were attached to his neck, these bells were shaking and they were creating sounds. Beautiful bells, sounds of the animal are there. Not only this bell sound is there, but also the sound of the falling of the snow and slow and easy air. That sound is also available. So the poet is talking about the sounds of nature also, the sounds which are created by the horse, and then the sounds which are created by nature in the form of soft air, in the form of the snowy flakes which are falling down. So the beauty of nature, not only in the shape of falling, in the shape of blowing of the wind, but also the sounds which they create, lends the musicality aspect to the poem and connects it with the shaking of the bells of the horse's neck when the horse is confused why the rider has stopped there. The scene becomes very much enjoyable in the sense that it's a human being standing in the center of the snowy flakes and the desert of snow, and the woods are dark in color, however their leaves are white with snow. Everywhere snow is there and nobody else, no human being is there. It is the poet himself, and later on the poet converts towards nature. So this is the whole picture, this whole image which is formed out through the poem of 3 stanzas. But the last stanza becomes even more philosophic, and it's very difficult to connect this last stanza with the beauty of the nature. However, one way is there. Let's see how we can connect it. The poet says, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Last line is repeated twice. That says, before I sleep, I have to keep my promises, and I have to go miles before I sleep. But the woods are beautiful, dark and deep, and there's snow. So the poet is actually trying to tell us that he wanted to stay there for more time. But he says that he cannot stop because he has to keep certain promises. And before stopping altogether, he needs to travel a lot. He needs to make a lot of journey. That is why emphasis is in the last lines. Miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. The stanza, this one, the last stanza is going to be the stanza where we can feel a lot of philosophical element. The inability of the human being to stop at one place and enjoy the nature is not possible while they are alive. Yes, when they're buried, when they're asleep, when they are dead, at that time they can become the part of eternal nature, otherwise they cannot. So the beauty of nature attracts man, and he cannot stay there. He needs to go away from that beauty, and it's possible only when he has completed his journey. Now this journey can be journey to reach the home, to eat food, or to live with the family, but then it can also be on a philosophical level, the journey of man's promises which he made before entering into this world, and he has to fulfill and keep those promises, and for doing so he needs to continue to travel for a very, very long time. Only then he can stop. So will of man is confined, will of man is limited. He is not free at all. Freedom is given to him for a limited time, limited sphere. So he cannot enjoy his life in the way he wants to. He needs to do the behests of nature. He needs to do the behests of the power power which sent him here in this world, and he needs to continue with that. Ultimately, he would become the part of all that, but he needs to keep the promises first of all, and then he needs to travel a lot or do a lot of things. So ultimately, he stops there. So in this way, the poem carries the philosophical content also. The poem carries the nature content as well. The poem carries the isolation of man as well. The poem carries limiting the freedom of man also. The poem carries the ultimate journey, the start and the stop, and ultimately it is the birth of man, it's the death of man. And in that way, in between span is there to let him work, let him do the things which he wants to do. So the poem reflects on many levels. It reflects on the power of nature, the beauty of nature. It reflects on man's power. It reflects on his limitations as well. It reflects on the connection that man has with the nature, man has with the animals. Man is really the part of that nature, but he needs to make a movement as well because his life is not a stoppage. He needs to move again and again. So the attraction which nature provides to the poet is maybe the snowy attraction, the cold attraction. But that attraction cannot stop the poet. Poet cannot stop there. He needs to move forward. He needs to explore other arenas of his life. And then there is the beauty of nature as well in the shape of the vision, in the shape of the colors which are coming up, in the shape of dark woods and the whiteness of the snow, hugeness of the snow, frozen water there, and ultimately the poet turns to the sounds of nature, and that is the bell sound and the air sound and ultimately falling the snow sound. All these sounds combine together to create a very beautiful image, and the effect of that image remains for a very long time. If we ask the question, why does the poet not tell us what kind of promises he has to keep? So it means that Robert Frost has left the reader of his poem to think about what is happening actually and why he needs to do that. So we come again and again to explore the poem. What was the reason behind that? This is the attraction. This is the beauty of the poem. Some of the technical aspects may be talked about. 4 lines in one stanza and 4 stanzas of equal length are there. Every stanza has its own rhyme scheme. For example, the first one is having A, and the second one is having A again. The third one, however, says that it is A, and the last stanza, very interestingly, has the rhyme scheme of D. All, I mean, the one sound is there, right? So in that way, rhyme scheme is also there, and the poets has used, symbols also. That's of the woods, that's of the snow, that's of the bells ringing, and ultimately it is going to be the journeys or the sleep. All these things have been used by the poet to enhance the impact of his poetry. And we do know the background of the American beautiful landscape when it is snow, and the poet has really enjoyed it, and it's the thing which everybody would like to enjoy. The poem creates a beautiful, lovely impact upon the reader, and one is left with the thinking and entering, and one practically feels to be standing in the middle of the snow, of the desert of the snow, and thinking like that, where should I go? Should I stop here? Should I go there? And the jerking of the bells of the horse prompts the poet and the reader as well to come out of that. So it's a kind of getting lost in the snow imaginatively, then coming out of that in the real world as well. This is the type of beautiful poem, and the poet has done a lot of work in order to create this type of image of the poem. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you have enjoyed. Do not fail to hit the subscribe button and to like button. If some comments are there, possibly I may be able to answer sometime then. So thank you for watching. Hope to see you again in some next video.